Good afternoon and welcome into the Morning Burrito Podcast. I am Michael.
I'm Kelly.
Speak into the microphone, my friend. They want to hear your wonderful
can't get
pipes.
Over the morning burrito in the afternoon. Sorry.
That's true. It is the morning burrito in the afternoon. He's always got to mess with me. Like,
sorry,
it's
play on words there.
I guess so. Well, hey, we had a wonderful week off away from the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show with Jenna last week as our guest, and it was really a fun show to do, and I hope you got something out of it. Those of you particularly who are young adults and who are heading towards college or are in college, and those who are parents who have kids in college, and just listening to some of the travails of college life for a Christian kid. And this week, I have obviously another guest host, as we will have throughout this sabbatical time. We're calling it Coffee Break. And so, Kelly, you've been on the show before. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Two bald guys is always right.
Hey, two are better than one.
Yeah.
Just saying. I'll try to keep everything short, just like our pastor.
Wow. Shots fired across the bow. That's awesome.
He's
he wasn't
not here
even
to
here.
Defend himself. So
that's right. So today, our show is all about fatherhood. We really felt like it was important to talk about some fatherhood issues, and I just came back from camp, and there were some things that I saw at camp that clearly to me were fatherhood issues, parenting issues. And so we're going to talk through that. You are parents of two boys and a girl, and I'm a parent of two girls. So we have slightly different experiences. Our kids are different ages, but our two girls are the same. So
yes.
So we'll be having an interesting conversation, I hope. And tune in, stick close, and hope you enjoy the show. Here we go. And we're back. Okay, well, let's get right into it. So let me ask you this, Kelly, to get us started. What is your dad is a great dude. He has also an awesome boat, by the way, just as an aside. He knows how to pick boats. But what is your fondest story that you have about your dad growing up?
That's tough. Because there was a lot.
Maybe it'll be two stories.
The biggest thing is we loved wood heat in our house. We had a wood burning fireplace, and one of my favorite thing to do was to go out and cut the tree down, split it, all that good stuff, and actually split firewood, believe it or not. I like to work, so that's probably ranks up there at the top 10. Just to go get firewood. And then there was a neighbor just around the corner that always bought firewood from us, so we'd have to go get firewood for them. So an old and elderly couple that used to give us candy all the time, so it's a bonus.
Yeah. Let me pause for just a second and just say, dude, this is beautiful. If you don't know, this is the guy who made this, and man, it's amazing to have our logo both times now. We've had two logos now. Mm-hmm. To see them go from the computer screen, to this. This is actually
metal.
You can hear that. That's metal.
Yeah.
But he actually cut sheet metal, and this is actually like 3D. It's actually raised away from the actual piece of metal, so it's really cool. So thank you for doing that for us. We really appreciate it, and it looks awesome. It's wonderful. I think for me, one of the greatest experiences I have had with my father, more than anything, is fishing. I remember my dad would take me to Silver Spring State Park, and we would fish for perch and for bluegill most of the time. And then there was a place near my dad's work, and it's like it wasn't a technical college, but they taught technical type classes. So you could take shop there, you could take auto body, that sort of thing.
People.
Yeah, your kind of people. That's right.
People.
And out behind this place, because it was right next to my dad's university, they had this little pond, and so we would go bluegill fishing there from time to time. And there was always something special about being out with my dad going fishing. And I think that's probably the case for you, and particularly your boy Chase. There's always something special. He wants to be out there fishing with his dad.
He wants to do a lot. He's definitely my outdoor person. So whether I'm doing lawn stuff, whether I'm fishing, hunting, camping, he wants to do it.
Yeah, well, and even any of the other thing for me, and I see this in Chase, is that when I was a kid, when my dad would be, repairing something, maybe it was a faulty faucet, or he was repairing, a sidewalk, piece or something. Like, I always wanted to be out there and learn from my dad and watch my dad help my dad do the maintenance of something. And I see that in your boys. He always wants to be right there with you, learning and doing.
Well, and that's how I know how to do a lot of my own stuff, is because watching Dad and being in similar to Chase, being that person that's your shadow right there.
Mm-hmm.
I could remember a couple of times where it was bring your son to work day, and I got to go to work with my dad, and we were let's see here, it was a little bathroom gazebo, and we were doing concrete work. But again, all of the knowledge, the real world knowledge, I learned from my dad, and he started out doing maintenance through Coos County Parks, and he was doing the weed eating and the mowing, and he gradually made it all the way up to parks director when he retired. But he learned through that all the different steps. So he learned the concrete, he learned the electrical, he learned the plumbing, and then I've learned it from him. Now I'm not as good as him on a couple of things, just because I don't deal with it every day. But yeah, a lot of the stuff that I know comes from him, and then a family friend. I learned most of my mechanical skills from him. So I got to work part-time, middle school and high school as a mechanic, and then, doing all the other stuff. So
yeah.
It's definitely, you got to be a sponge and soak up as much as you can. And especially, these days you get a lot of, being a teacher, you get a lot of students that don't have a dad or don't have that fatherly figure. So it definitely is I would say it's a deficit of children these days, is they don't have a lot of that.
Yeah, I think you and I, well, I know that you and I were raised very similarly growing up. Maybe minus the church part. I mean, you went to church. You were raised in church for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I really wasn't to any large extent.
Is what you're saying?
Huh?
You were a heathen, is what you're saying?
Sure, I guess you could say that. No, my parents taught us to believe in God. Certainly, my dad wanted me to believe that there was a God, but we were never really church-going people
Right.
as I was growing up. But my dad, very similar to your dad, worked at a university. He was the head of the maintenance department, facilities and maintenance department at the university for a long time. And so I got to hang out with the carpenters, the lawn care guys, the plumbers, the electricians that worked at the university. And so, summertimes I would go to the university and do demolition work and take a sledgehammer to walls and things. And
That's the fun part.
yeah. Except but then you have to take
demo.
but then you have to take the stuff out. Like, hitting the stuff and knocking it down, not a problem. It's the taking the pieces of the stone by wheelbarrow out the door. That's always the harder part.
Is the demolition.
I mean, I learned how to drive a stick shift by driving a dump truck at the university, which my dad would probably get in trouble for that now.
Say, you better
bleep that part out.
That part out, yeah. Bleep, yeah.
No, he's retired, so it's okay. They can't take his retirement away for that, I don't think. Knock on wood. No, but I mean, like you, I learned everything I know, and I don't know a lot. You know a lot more than I do. I tend to lean on you a lot for things because I don't know very much. But what I do know, I know because of my dad. And it's interesting, as kids, we always look at our dads and we say, you treat me different than, the brother or the sister or both. We always look at, like, we're always treated differently, and usually that's a negative thing, right? We always view our dads as being mean to us.
Well, we think that he is being specific in teaching each one of us differently. In my dad's I mean, as far as I can remember, he taught us the same things. It's just like anything, you get what you need out of it, or perceive to get what you out of it. So it's different because I see my dad. He was teaching us all the same things, but just like we have to adapt, we have to teach it, but we also have to figure out better ways to teach different. Like my sons are polar opposites, so you have to teach them two different ways. And I think with my dad is he taught us all the same stuff, but you kind of have to put that little twist to get us to buy in.
Proverbs 22, verse 6, again, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 says this: "Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it." Which goes to what you were just saying. Like, it is important. It is a role of a dad to teach your kids the way they should go. And that can be spiritual for sure, and we'll get to that, I think, here in a little bit. But even from just how to be a man, how to live life, how to respect women, all of these things, that's the dad's responsibility. And it's not to say that kids who come from a single mother home or anything can't be successful without a dad in the home. There is something to be said for a dad. Dad can teach things that, frankly, it's very much more difficult for a woman to teach a boy. I know that's true for me. My mom certainly did not teach me the same things that my dad taught me. I never had a fear, quote unquote, of my mom. I did have a fear of my dad. Like, my dad, to this day, I mean, he's kind of an imposing dude. Like, he's not mean, or he was never abusive or anything like that. But I had a healthy fear of my father.
Yeah. Well, I think just in the the era that we grew up, there was a favorite spoon that I got swapped pretty good. But again, it made me who I am today. I mean, and I wouldn't change that.
Right. Well, and the thing is, I think when we look at children today, we did a show just a couple weeks ago about, I think I was with Andy at the time. We were talking about how the way that older folks and younger folks look at each other is significantly different today than it ever has been before, because of the entitlement nature of younger people. And the truth is that, as we discussed then, a lot of that's parenting. It's particularly our parents had this view that, well, we're going to give our kids more than we ever had. We're going to give them the things we never could have as kids. Right. And that's actually a dangerous mentality. What it does is it actually creates this entitlement culture now with kids, where they think that they are owed and deserve things as opposed to earning them. I know you and I have talked a lot about when we look at college versus like the trades, and how, the trades, you have to work for that. Not to say that college is easy. I'm certainly not saying that. I went to college, but trades, you actually have to work to learn and earn the right to be called a journeyman, or to be called a master, right? Whatever, a master plumber, a master electrician. And it's not so much that way when you get a degree. Maybe it's a gender studies degree, or a lesbian dance theory or something like that from a college, basket weaving, underwater basket weaving. Yeah. You come out of college and you think, oh, I'm entitled to a job. Well, it doesn't really work that way in the real world. You really haven't done anything to earn that degree, earn that job, because there aren't so many jobs that are asking for the qualifications of somebody who went to school for underwater basket weaving.
And that's where, I guess I'm a different kind of teacher, because I will ask my student what they want to do. I mean, a few years ago, I asked a student, "What do you love to do?" And he goes, "Well, I love playing video games." I'm like, "Okay, why don't you do that as a job?" What do you mean? Like, you do realize that people get paid just to play video games? I says, better yet, why don't you design video games and make more? So again, not a lot of people know kind of what's out there, but I tell my students every single year, if you have a job and you wake up in the morning and go, I got to go to work. That's probably not the job for you, and it's one of those things getting across. You gotta find your passion, whether that be playing video games, whether that be fishing, whether that be, I don't know, going on tour with a band. All of that is very reachable. It's just a matter of how much you put into it. Do you want to ultimately go that far? And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes a little prodding from, parents doing their thing and figuring out, okay, what do you want to do? So I think, yes, we can teach how we always teach, but again, it comes to a fact where you have to ultimately let them decide what they want to do. And I think that's very, very difficult as parents, because we know that they can be this huge, incredible, and then they don't do that. They take the easy road. But again, it's being that parent to know when is the time to step in and when is the time to let them figure it out on their own. It's kind of like, baby bird and mama bird. You got to learn to fly sometime.
It kind of reminds me of fishing, because you and I, that's like our favorite thing to do together is going fishing. Besides playing Call of Duty, maybe.
Yeah.
But when you go fishing, I know we go with your son Chase quite often, and one of the things that my dad had to do with me is he had to teach me how to fish, right? Yeah. That I couldn't just put the pole in the water and catch something. That's not how it works. You have to actually show them. And I think one thing that, for whatever reason, again, this is a show mostly for dads. It's not to say, moms, you can't listen to this, because you should, and there's probably value in it for you too. But we as parents, we have to show our kids the reason why we do things. And I think more than any other time in history, at least our experience has been working with students, because you work with high school students, I work with high school students and middle schoolers. The reality is that students, they are not taught things. They are told what to believe. They're told what not to believe, but they're not actually taught how to do things anymore as much. You do, and you're in a trade, so you're teaching them how to be welders for sure. But when I think about it in fishing terms, we have to teach our kids how to put the bait on the hook, what kind of bait to use, right? Like trial and error. A lot of times you don't know what bait's going to be used. We found through trial and error here on the Columbia, our part of the Columbia, that if you want to bass fish, there's lots of things that people say you can use for bass fishing.
Right.
By and large, the most fish you're going to catch are going to be with watermelon colored fake bait. Like that's what catches bass out here. Like I've used everything but live bait, and the majority of the fish bass that I've caught on the Columbia near us is with watermelon colored fake bait.
Unless you're Josh.
Well,
he changes his lure every 5 minutes. So,
or if you're Gideon and you catch everything.
Yeah, that's true.
But even when I started fishing with you, I had never really boat fished before. I've always been a shore fisherman. So I even had to learn how to be a fisherman on a boat, because it's a different experience than being on the shore. Yep. Being able to share space when you're casting, like all of those things are things you have to learn. There are intricacies to fishing. And the same as for you as a dad or you as a mom, man, it's so important for you to show your kids. And that means that you got to take the time. When we talk about spiritual things in your home, dads, it is your responsibility. The Bible is very clear. It is your responsibility to lead your kids in the way they should go. That's not something you should take lightly. It is your responsibility to be the spiritual head of your household. I know with you guys, one of the things that I've been so impressed with is you guys take every day to pray together. You spend time in the Word together. I don't know if it's a daily thing, but frequently
needs to be a daily thing.
I know during COVID, like every single night, you guys were praying together. You would like, I got to get off. We got to go pray. Like that's showing your kids, and that's not to puff you up in front of our audience, but that's just something we can learn from you. Is that's a really important thing to be doing with your kids. I know as my oldest has gotten into now middle school, I feel even more of a burden than I ever have before to lead my daughter, to lead her well, because I know she's going into a world that's not necessarily kind to young ladies.
That's crazy.
There's a lot of negativity around, her looking for a man who is worth her time someday. Not
Hopefully
not
long ways away.
yeah, but I mean a man who's worth her effort and worth spending time with. I mean that's I need to teach her that. What is a real man, quote unquote, look like? A real man loves God. A real man is focused on Jesus. A real man is wanting to be the spiritual head and wanting to lead her in a good way. A man who's going to respect her. A man who's going to show her the dignity and charity that she deserves and has earned, who's going to cherish her. I mean, all of these things as a dad, teaching her that, she needs to dress a certain way, not because she needs to fear men, but because she respects herself and she has value from God.
Right. And it's one of those things where, luckily, my wife, Becky, we kind of share that, because if I'm hunting or fishing and I'm away, she actually fills in the void. Which, when you have that right person, you can depend on them to do that. And especially if you find the right person that is brought up the same teaching as you were. So that makes a difference, because I know whether I'm there or whether I'm gone somewhere, I know that they're going to get pretty similar teaching, whether it's from me or my wife. So, I mean, it makes a difference. Again, I've known my wife since 4th grade, I think. Well, yeah, 4th grade, and we really didn't like each other until right before our senior year. So it's one of those things. I don't know.
Well, she liked you.
Well, she liked my truck first. So
That happens.
yeah. So she liked my truck, and then, she just so happens that I came with the truck. So
You weren't bald back then either.
I was not bald.
So that's part of the problem.
Yeah. If I was bald, she would have saw me first.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been any other boys for her, because
That's true.
she's seen the baldness and she would have been like, yes.
Well, she probably would have been blinded from the glare, but
One
of
the
the downsides.
Some of the kids have seen in our youth group have seen pictures of my wedding, and they still cannot believe that I had hair. I'm like, what do you think I just went bald? Like all of a sudden, like all my hair just fell out? Like I still have hair.
Since birth.
Yeah.
I was bald since birth. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 Corinthians 6:18 says, again, 2 Corinthians 6:18, and I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty. God, for many of you that may be listening to this, I know there have been many in my pastoral time that I've come across that'll say things like, well, I have a hard time looking at God as a father because my father sucked and it was a bad person and did bad things and whatnot. And I totally understand and resonate with that in so much that I know that must be difficult for you. But the reality is God is our father. And while our human fathers are imperfect, I mean, we as fathers are imperfect. Yeah. I know I've made lots of mistakes with my 2 girls. I think you would echo that with your boys and girl.
I still do.
Yeah. But the reality is we do have a father who doesn't make errors, that doesn't make mistakes, who loves us unconditionally, whose love never fails us. And we are fortunate, I think, as humanity to be forgiven by a father who doesn't have a reason to forgive us, other than the fact that he loves us. Like God truly doesn't have to forgive us of our sins, and he wants to lead us as good fathers want to lead their kids. We spent a week at camp. Well, you weren't there, but I was there. You were with family.
Different kind of camp.
Different kind of camp, yeah. But I was with your boys, so that was a win.
That was a win for me too, because they were with you.
But one of the things that was really cool is to watch how, particularly, we had one guy who was with us this week, who is a dad for 2 of our boys in the youth group. It was his first time coming to one of our events as a leader, quote unquote, and whatnot. And his boys went down to the altar during the camp. And to see him go down there and pray with his boys, put his arms around them, it was just this picture of fatherhood that I thought about the story of the prodigal son, and just God wrapping his arms around his son that was lost. We can't really have a fatherhood discussion without that. That as dads, it can be very difficult, I think, at times when our kids are stupid and make dumb mistakes.
Yeah, but we've been there.
Yeah, but
I mean,
but we're human, right? So running to our kids, like that story talks about, when they've made mistakes, and I mean, his kid literally treated him as if he was dead. I mean, that's for all intents and purposes, he was treating his dad like he's dead to him, and yet he goes running after his son. He pursues his son. We as dads, parents, moms, that needs to be how we pursue our children, and we don't give up. We don't call it quits. We don't throw up our hands and say our kid's finished. Like until they go in the grave, no kid is finished. No kid is done.
And hopefully they go in the grave after us.
Yeah, well, and hopefully when that day comes, they're going, somewhere good as opposed to somewhere bad,
Right.
for sure. Well, with our last a little bit of time we have left on the show, I just want us to share some cool stories from our own kids and raising our own kids, because you're right. I mean, in your case, you have 3 kids, 2 different genders between your kids, and what can you share some funny or cool stories from being a dad, like things that have happened in your fatherly journey so far that have been interesting?
So with our first, Cameron, I can remember I'm fishing with my dad, and the lake that we were fishing, we had to get fuel, so we pull over to the dock. So my dad's worrying about getting fuel, and I'm sitting there watching him, make sure he doesn't get anything in the water, and all I hear is a splash, and then a rope gets tossed overboard, and it's still tied on. And I look over, and I says, "What are you doing, Cameron?" "Well, I'm fishing." I'm like, "Oh, well," and I'm looking around for the wireless motor remote, and it's not anywhere to be seen. And I says, "Well, what are you using for bait?" He goes, "Well, what I had." And he threw in my dad's wireless trolling motor remote in the water. And we haven't even gone fishing yet. So he's filling up. So luckily at the dock, they had this huge net. It's like 12 foot long pole. And I just started dragging the bottom. Luckily, it was only like 8 feet deep. And I ended up finding it, pulled it up, made sure everything worked. It worked like champ. I mean, it was sealed up, but yeah, it's... since then, I had to look and make sure everything that was at least bolted down or tied down so he wouldn't throw it over. So, again...
You got to teach your kid how to fish.
Right. And now you know why they have, wireless remotes around your neck, so they can't just grab and toss it in.
Just like you had to teach your other son how to use the rope to
seriously,
to tie off so it doesn't get split and the boat goes flying away from you.
That's the other thing. Putting it in, and there just so happens aluminum sign. Well, he's dragging it around the railing, and it gets to the aluminum side, and it just snip, there it goes. Like, well, get the boat. Yeah, I almost went swimming that day too. So.
And
yet I still have a boat.
Yeah, and after our little excursion, dude, you're lucky you have a boat.
That was.
Oh man, we'll talk about that in a little bit because that's a fun story.
No,
we have to talk about that story.
It's not fun.
It's a great story.
No, it's not.
A great. I've already used it in a sermon twice, so it's a great. Once with the students and once with the adults.
Wow.
So.
And you didn't even get written permission from me from that?
I experienced it, so I don't have to ask for permission.
Okay.
It's not your story; it's my story. It's our story.
It's our story. Okay.
Anyway, so I will never forget. As you're growing up, and you especially. I shouldn't say especially. I don't know if this is true for women as much as it's for me and men. But, a lot of times we look at our dads, and oftentimes as young men or teenagers, we're like, man, our dads are dumb. Like, they tell us stuff that is just stupid, whatever. I remember my oldest daughter, Harper, was born, and I left the room to go sit between my father-in-law and my dad. They were in the waiting room. They hadn't been in to see my wife or the baby yet. And I sit down in between them, and they had been talking or whatever. And I turned to my dad, and they're both looking at me. And I said, "Dad, everything you told me, everything you tried to tell me, everything you taught me, all of it was true. I was an idiot. I'm sorry." Because the full weight of becoming a father when my first kid was born just washed over me like nobody's business, and I understood for the first time in my adult life, wow, my dad actually had a lot of wise things to say. I wish I would have listened to, like, I don't know, half of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably didn't even listen to half.
Yeah.
But
because they were dumb at the time.
They were dumb at the time, but they weren't actually dumb. I'll also, that same day, so when Harper was born, and maybe it's just because she's the firstborn, it was my first experience, I don't know, because it certainly didn't happen with the second one. Sorry, Clara. She came out screaming. Whew. And she hasn't stopped. 2 years later, almost 3 years later, she's still screaming. No, when Harper came out, she came out with her eyes wide open, quiet, just looking around, breathing normal and everything, but just looking around like, okay, this is my new normal. All right. Okay. And they put her on the little table, incubator table or whatever, and they're, checking her temperature and cleaning her off and all of those things. And then they need to weigh her and get her length. And so they put her on the scale. And as soon as they put her on that cold scale with the wax paper, she bless me. She starts screaming, like screaming bloody murder. It was the first time we'd heard our baby cry, and she was as loud as get out as it could be. I mean, it was, yeah. And the nurse looks at me and she says, "Hey, Dad, do you want to come over here and help with it?" I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I have no idea what you want me to do. And the nurse says, "Hey, just put your hand on her chest and let her know you're there." And so I come and I squeeze in there between the doctor and the nurse, and I put my hand on Harper's chest. And as soon as I put my hand on her chest, she stops screaming and she just looks at me. And it was one of the coolest moments. And in that moment, I had this realization that I've never had before. And I mean, I've had it since because of this, but I guess I never really understood that, I love this little kid more than anything that I could ever describe outside of my wife. Like, there is a love that I have for this child that I cannot even begin to describe.
Immeasurable.
Yeah. And yet that's only a fraction of the love that God has for us. This is all happening in the moment in my brain, and I'm having this realization that God loves us that much, that it is so much more than me as a dad how much I love my kid. And so that's like the cute story, right? The unfortunate part of being a father is that you have to go through the hard stuff with your kids as well. And I got two quick stories on that. Number one, again, with my older daughter, she's been around a lot longer, so we got more stories about her. But we had a really unfortunate and difficult situation at a church in New Mexico. The relationship between me and that church ended very poorly, and it was a very difficult situation. And we were in the U-Haul driving across country back from New Mexico to the Midwest where my wife and I grew up. And to see my daughter like bawling her eyes out and anxious and throwing up and, not understanding the situation that was happening, why we were moving, why didn't she get to say goodbye to her friend, all of those things. It was really hard. And as a dad, it's like you almost feel like you're a failure, like you've messed something up for your kid. And you don't know how to help them, but she did recover from that, and that's a beautiful thing. But then with my younger daughter, and this is funny, more funny to you probably than it is to me because I'm still too close to it. But my younger daughter has become a poo Picasso.
How many times are you gonna tell that?
Oh, dude, this is her fault. She's gonna grow up someday and like getting married, and people are gonna run into her and be like, I saw your dad on the Morning Burrito podcast, and I heard about you pooping all over the walls and stuff.
Yes, but are you still gaining traction from this story, or
what do you mean?
I mean, it's not new though. Everybody wants the new and greatest.
Yeah, but this is a continuing story that never ends, it seems like. No, actually, truth be told, she has the last month or so, maybe even closer to 2 months, we haven't had an issue. I hope that means we're past this and it's finally over. If you could pray for us, the potty training thing not going well. We want her to potty train, but she just doesn't have an interest. They always said, if you have an older kid, that the younger kid will have a faster potty training experience because of the older one. Nope.
I know what this is.
Clara, you want to go to the bathroom? Nope. I'm more content with having a diaper on so I could just go whenever I want.
I think this is one of those instances where God has a sense of humor.
Well, my dad did say that if I had a second one, I was going to get it. And I was a terrible, terrible, terrible child. Really, I was a terrible child all the way up till adulthood pretty much, and well into adulthood, maybe even if my parents were here. But my mom and dad always said, Harper was such a good kid and is such a good kid that eventually, if you have a second, you're going to get it, and it's going to get it. You're going to get it good.
So it's your parents, and they're getting the.
We're Christian. We don't believe in karma, but you're right. God does have a sense of humor,
yep.
and my kid, the younger one is a holy terror of epic proportions.
But you love her to death.
I do love her to death, especially when she. I don't know what it is about Cameron versus Chase, and particularly even Ari, your youngest. Like Cameron loves her to death and wants to hold her and stuff, but she's like, nope, not having it.
Yep.
Nope, stay away from me. And then Ari, she talks about your youngest all the time.
Well, it's
where's
like,
Ari? Where's Ari?
It's like students that see me, they're intimidated by me. I'm like,
he's a teddy bear.
Seriously.
He's a big teddy bear.
It's like I have a goatee and I'm bald. Why does that make me...
You look like Mr. Clean.
Okay.
And you got muscles,
Not
dude.
all white. Okay, just a streak.
Yet. Give it time, brother. Give it time. All right. Well, as we wrap up here, I just want to encourage you from two dads who are doing the best that we can. Just because I'm a pastor doesn't mean I have all the parenting, knowledge or, I'm not a guru.
I'm a teacher, it's the same thing. I'm not perfect.
We go through the same sorts of struggles and headaches. I know if you're a dad of a daughter or mom of a daughter, the same, fears and worries and concerns that you may have about your daughters, I'm dealing with it. It's a hard weight to carry. I know that we've talked about our own daughters who are the same age. It's hard. It's hard to look at culture and look at society, and it's hard as a dad to look at that and be like, man, I'm really optimistic for our kids. But here's the thing. God's got it in his hands. God's in control. And we believe, and we hope you do too, that you have been placed as the head of your family. You've been placed as a parent over your children for a reason, that God has specifically put you there to do a work in the life of your kids. And so if I can just leave you with a couple words of advice that has helped me. Number one, don't miss the opportunity to share your story with your kids. If you're a believer, share your story with your kids. Let them know where you've been and, the journey that you've been on with God, because that is an invaluable story to tell your kids. I know that I've appreciated knowing where my dad was, and how going to the Air Force, my dad struggled mightily in his faith, and met my mom, his wife, in church. He went to an ice cream social for young adults when they did those things back then in the 80s. And
what's that?
Yeah, and gets engaged to my mom after 2 weeks, marries her after 6 months, and then they had a kid shortly after that with my sister. So, it's amazing what God can do. So, so that's number one. Share your stories with your kids. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to tell them even some of the detail. You don't have to go into all the details, but let them know that you had things that happened in your life and you've been down those roads, and that you want to prevent them from making the same mistakes you did. Also, pray with your kids and pray for your kids. I think that, again, showing your kids that prayer matters and that you are a prayerful person. If you're not, you need to do it. You just need to be a prayer person. There's no such thing as people who are specifically gifted to pray and those who are not. that's not in Scripture, that's not in the Bible. We are all called to be prayer warriors. We're all called to lay our lives before God at His feet. And so be a praying person for your kids and with your kids. And then help your kids understand how to learn Scripture, how to read Scripture. There's nothing more important than your kid getting in the Word and knowing the Word. Help them to memorize scriptures, help them to know where things are in the Bible. We have these wonderful phones, but what happens if technology goes away? Like, we're only going to have the hard copy Bible. So let them know how to use that Bible, because it is a resource that God gave us to be able to grow in our faith. And so don't miss that. And then the last part is help your kids to understand how to tap into the Holy Spirit power that is available to us. The Holy Spirit wants to work and transform us, and you need to help your kids see that. So if you're living a life that is not really evident of the Holy Spirit working, if you're not showing the fruits of the Spirit, and you know you should be, get your life right. Get yourself turned back to God, because imitation is important, and kids learn by watching others. And so if you're not living right, you can't expect your kids to make good choices if you're not making good choices yourself. Yeah. Be somebody who makes right choices. And when you screw up, admit it, own it, and change.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me is, my dad wasn't perfect, but he did explain some things and what happened. Maybe on another time I'll talk to you a big accident that happened to my dad, which was gut-wrenching, to say the least. But again, he's only here for a reason, and that reason is because somebody was watching over him. A story for another time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's end. I promised that I would tell this story, so I'm going to tell this story because you're here, and it's already making you laugh, so it's great. Okay, so contrary to what our typical intelligence and common sense would have told us, we don't normally go fishing when it's windy outside, particularly in a boat. And so you called me and said, hey, you want to go fishing? I was like, yeah, I want to go fishing. And I hadn't noticed it was windy outside. It really wasn't that windy here. This is the weird thing about our area is sometimes
weird.
It can be not windy in town and windy at the river, and vice versa. It can be not windy at the river and windy in town. So you never really know. You got to go to the river to find out if it's windy. So anyway, it wasn't super windy here. And so we got in the boat, headed down to the river. And as we got to where, if you live in Hermiston, you know where the Chrysler Dodge dealership is, right at the top of the hill. You could tell, it's a lot windier. It's getting a little windy. And so we went down to the dam, to where above the dam where you put in your boat, the boat ramp. And the best is the dude that was coming into the boat ramp when we got there.
Should have.
Because he gets out and he's like, "Are you guys going out fishing?" I'm like, "Yep." He's like, "You sure?" It's pretty windy.
Number two.
Indication
number two.
That was number two, because the wind of itself.
The wind was number one.
The wind was number one.
The guy coming off the water is number two.
Yeah, he's like, the last 15 minutes it's gotten real bad. Yeah. And I looked at you when he said that, and I was like, are we going? Okay, we're going. All right, let's do this. And so we get in, we head out, and going across. I mean, we got wet a little bit on our way across the river. And it was a little windy, to say the least, but it wasn't awful at that point.
It was doable.
Yeah. And we got to the other side, and you put the sock out, and you had the anchor down, and it just was not going to work. We could tell pretty quickly that there was no fish to be caught. Yeah. And I think we were out there maybe 10 or 15 minutes tops. It wasn't very long.
Maybe half an hour tops.
Yeah. And so then you're like, okay, we're gonna go back. Let's get out of here before it gets any worse. And
Famous last words.
Yeah, we literally got. Correct me if I'm wrong. We got halfway across the river, and as soon as we were away from where the cliff was diverting deflecting the wind, it was like 3 to 4, maybe even 5 foot. Some of the crests of the waves, and we were like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, we should have stayed at the boat ramp.
And then we got close to the dock, and you could see where there's like that dock that floats next to the ramp, and the water is at the level and over the level of the dock. And so we pulled up, and you literally jumped out of the boat, and that same rope that we mentioned earlier that Chase had.
We tied it from that instance.
It was tied on the boat, the front of the boat, and it was tied onto the dock. And Chase is on the back side of the boat holding the cleat of the dock, trying to hold the back end of the boat to the dock. And long story short, the rope snapped off the boat. So
In
I
two
was
places.
Well, the first time it snapped off the boat.
Yeah.
So I caught the rope in midair. And all that's attached, it's me in the boat and then the cleat on the dock. So I'm holding it, and I yelled for you, and I said, "Hey, the rope is snapping." And so you got into like a dead sprint. I mean, you took off running, and then it was like it felt like a long time, but it really was like almost instantaneous. The rope then snapped off the cleat on the dock because the dock was doing this thing, and the boat was doing the opposite, And I looked at Chase, and I looked at that. I looked at the rope in my hand, and I had this thought. I'm like, okay, what now? So the only thing I could think of in the split second was to scream. And I've joked about this with the students and with the adults. I screamed probably like a 12-year-old girl, or a boy that's going through puberty.
High pitch.
Like
High pitch, yeah.
I don't know that I've ever screamed as loud as I screamed out of fear for you. And you had just gotten, I think you were just at the truck at that time, and you came running back, and your son, man, I'm so proud of Chase. This is the thing. Like, I am the man in the boat. I should have been the one that jumped on the wheel and the throttle and just did something. I don't know that I would have known what I was doing, but I should have done something. But Chase, you said, "Hey, Chase, get on the wheel." And so Chase goes and gets on the wheel. And while it didn't end up working out exactly how I think we would have liked, he did the best he possibly could have in the situation when he was definitely scared and I was scared. And all I could do is just like, "We're going to be all right, dude. We're going to be all right. Just keep taking us in circles. We're okay." And long story short, you went and tried to get the trailer down into the water, and it's like superhero stuff. Like, this guy jumps off of the seawall into the boat and gets us onto the trailer. And oh man, like I knew I wasn't gonna die, so I don't mean to make it sound like it was like a life and death situation, but the boat certainly could have been lost.
You almost died. Makes the story better.
That's right.
Yeah, I almost died.
I think your boat could have suffered a whole lot worse of fate than it ended up.
Yeah,
because it could have gotten swamped pretty easy.
Banged up prop.
Yeah, just a banged up prop.
Yeah. And then you had the other indication was the guy that drove down after we just get the boat out of the water. Were you guys out in that?
No,
we weren't out in there. We weren't idiots.
We're not that dumb. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
no way. No, it's as I've said before, and I said in a sermon a few weeks ago, it makes me appreciate the story from the Gospels where Jesus calms the storm, or the story of Peter walking on the water in the middle of the storm. I totally get it now. I know why they had that fear. I had never experienced that kind of fear before, because you genuinely don't know what to do. Like,
honestly,
what are you supposed to do?
We don't know how bad it was. All it said was, stormy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And also that it can change at the drop of a hat. So, I mean, we're never truly ready for anything that throws at us, because we don't know what's going to get thrown at us.
Which is like life. I mean, life. And here's the thing. I will leave us with this today. Clearly good parenting, because your kid was willing to he's been trained enough and is blood enough to you that he was able to just get on that throttle and on that rudder and direct the boat where it needed to go.
Yeah, because it definitely could have gotten worse.
Yeah. So. It's a good story. It's something we can always. I will never. Hey, no matter how long we live, that is a situation I will never ever forget.
Yeah, me neither. And I don't think you'll let me anyways. So.
No, it's not your fault. I mean, like I think we as adults and as dads. I mean, it was your kid, not my kid, but
yeah.
I mean, we probably could have been smarter and just not gone fishing.
Not probably. Yes, we could have been smarter.
You know,
We should have got to the top of the hill and go, no.
let's just turn around.
Yeah,
Let's go play Call of Duty.
exactly.
But
And I think that's what we did afterwards.
But again, it's a teachable moment, and I learned something. I think you learned something. I know your son learned something, and so, hey, it's always a win as long as you learn something from bad things. I mean, and it could have been a lot worse, and it wasn't. So,
So that just means you're going to have to go get your boater safety card, and I'm going to have Chase do his just in case. I'm not always going to be there, okay?
I honestly thought, like, I was like, to make matters worse would have been you falling down and hurting yourself trying to run or something, like, or
Tripped and fell.
falling off the seawall into the water would have been
It
a
was only
bad
a
deal.
couple feet deep, though. It was okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of rocks down there. I've lost a
Obviously.
lot of lures there.
Obviously, my prop shows it.
Well, hey, hope you enjoyed the morning burrito. I think next week we will have Gabrielle on the show. I don't know yet what we're going to talk about, but she's always fun to have on the show, and she's excited to do it.
Seriously, no teasers?
Yeah, not today.
Wow.
I didn't have a teaser for this one either.
It's like you're letting me down here. Seriously.
That's okay.
Wow.
You just need to watch.
You had 2 weeks to build this up.
How about I was at camp?
Goodness.
By the way, camp. Teenagers for 1 week. That's all I got to say.
A lot of teenagers.
A lot of and 100-degree heat. You mix all, and no AC, by the way, either. So all of those things, I'm lucky to be alive. That's all I got to say.
You almost died again.
Probably so.
Yeah,
It was worse
sorry.
than the boat incidents, to be honest.
Seriously? Wow. Way to downplay that one.
But hey, we love you guys, and thank you, Kelly, for joining us. And his nickname, by the way, Sprinkles.
Seriously, you had to put that out there.
I have to tell our audience here, my cousin living all the way in Singapore watching the show.
Hey, that's okay.
Sprinkles.
I've been called a lot worse. So.
Hopefully somebody puts it in the comments section so it'll live in infamy forever.
Big
Yep.
word. Well,
It's
not
not-
for you. It's a big word for me. You know, welder.
I was gonna say shop teacher. You know, that's
shop teacher. I don't have a
You're
very
not-
big vocabulary.
I'm not an English teacher.
No. I don't English people.
All right. Oh man, this show's been fun. Okay, we'll see you guys next week on the Morning Burrito podcast.